Okay, so today we're looking at how we can morph one bitmap image into another bitmap image, or a pixel-based image. So we're not talking about vectors here. We're talking about, I'm going to use PNGs in this example, but any pixel image could work. Okay, so before we get going, let's look at what's happening here. You can see I've got two layers. Okay, the layer on the top is the image I want to start with, and the layer underneath is the image I want to finish off with. So let's play it and see how that looks. Okay, real simple morph. If I isolate just the top layer, so I'm going to hide the back layer, and we look at what's going on, you can see that the cat on the top is morphing into the shape of the cat underneath and fading at the same time. Meanwhile, if we isolate the cat underneath, it starts scrunched up into the size of the small cat, right, hidden behind it. And it just kind of grows off into its own size and gets revealed, right, since the little cat is fading away, it reveals the big cat underneath. Okay, so pretty straightforward. This is done using something called masks, where you see that each layer has two different masks. Masks, just think of them as paths. And we've got a green one and a pink one. And all we're doing is telling the bitmap, telling this PNG to stretch out and fit the pink path, right? So it starts, right, naturally, starts inside this green path because that's the actual shape of this cat. And we're going to tell it, grow and morph and warp yourself to fit the pink path, which is the shape of the big cat. And then over on the big cat layer, we're doing the opposite. We're giving it the exact same paths, and we're saying start out scrunched up inside the pink path, which is the same path as the little cat. And as time goes on, slowly go back and reshape yourself into the green path. So that's how we're going to achieve this. There's a little bit of file preparation involved, and I've already done it, but I'll just show you what it looks like. You want to open your files in Photoshop, and I've created PNGs so that I can have transparency, right? I want that transparency. And you want to ensure that the canvas size for both of these is the same, okay? If you try to do this with files that have two different canvas sizes, it's going to make your life really difficult. So I've got 1280 by 1280 for Toracat and for Litten. Canvas size is also 1280 by 1280 pixels. Okay, so that works for me. Whatever you do, make sure each is the same, and make sure you get that transparency. Okay, you could pen tool around it. However you do it, it's up to you. So that's it. We don't need to do anything else in Photoshop. We just want to, well, why don't I delete what I have? Okay. And I'm just going to drag these guys into my project panel. Okay. This is the project panel. You want to drag them in. Okay. And then they'll appear in the project panel. And I'm just going to select them and drag them down here into the layers panel. Now, right off the bat, you can see our cats are too big, right? And you might be tempted to just grab them and resize them, like this, size them up. The problem there is all that hard work you did to make these the exact same size back in Photoshop, you've just undone that work, okay? So what I recommend is selecting both of them. So I've selected Litten, and I'm just going to hold down Shift and select Toracat. And then if we click this down arrow once, we'll see the transform options. So let's expand that, right? And we can find scale. And to change the scale, all I'm going to do is click, hold, and drag to the left. And because I've selected both layers, we're going to be able to move both of them. Now, it doesn't matter how big you make them. I'm going to use 50%. Okay, 50% is just fine with me. Cool, so now we know for sure these guys are the same size, and that matters to us. Next step is to get those paths, right? We need those paths so we can say, hey, smoosh yourself into the shape of the little cat, which is defined by this path, or hey, grow into the size of the big cat, which is defined by this path. So to do that, because we've got a PNG with transparency, we can just select one of the layers. I'll start with Litten, the small cat. I'm going to go to Layer, Auto Trace. Now, you're going to want to use current frame. So work area will create a keyframe for every frame of this path. Okay, we don't want to do that because we're not actually animating the paths at all. We're animating the image inside of it. So just set it to current frame. The channel will be alpha. Okay, alpha is just, let's call it the color that computers see as transparency, right? So you know red, green, blue, right? RGB. You know those, and you know when you mix them, you get all the colors in the rainbow. Alpha is the color of transparency. So what we're saying is use the transparency, use that where the colors meet an edge of transparency and trace that edge. Okay, so we want that. And then these ones, tolerance, I've got 1 pixel, minimum area 10, threshold 50, corner roundness 40. Those ones aren't super important, but current frame and alpha are. Okay, so we'll create that. And you can see here we've got this nicely auto-traced path around our kitty. In theory, you could do this pathing in Illustrator and bring it in. That would be harder. So you'll notice, though, there's actually, look, there's 2 paths, isn't there? I've got Litten, and when I look at my masks, I see mask 1, which is that purple path, and then I see mask 2, which is this orange one. I'm going to change the color to make it easier to see and make it bright green. Okay, there it is. So there's some transparency, I guess, like inside the cat. Now, we don't really need this path because it's just adding complexity. We're only concerned with the outer edge. So I'm going to delete it. I'm just going to select it here and press delete. Now it's gone. Okay. You might not have that, right? You might have more than 2. You might have 3 or 4. I had 2. I don't need the inside one, so I deleted it. Cool. The next thing I'm going to do is rename that mask. I'm going to rename it Litten Mask. Why? Litten is the name of this small cat here. So this way I know that this is the mask that traces the outline of the small cat. And that will be useful for me later. All right, let's do the same thing with Toracat. So I'll select the bottom layer, Toracat here. Okay, I'm gonna go Layer, Auto Trace. I want current frame, channel will be alpha. Okay, and there we go. Now let's check down in here and see if we have 2. No, we don't. So there was no, like, I guess, hole in the cat anywhere where there was an internal mask. So we're all good. We don't need to delete anything. I'm going to rename this one. I'm going to call it Toracat. I'll just call it Tora Mask. Okay, because that's the name of the big cat. One thing that I see being potentially confusing here, see how this is purple and this is pink? Those colors are too close together. It's going to make it hard for me to, like, I don't know, like see what I'm doing, I guess. So I'm going to recolor one. I'm going to make one bright green. And I'm choosing green and purple because, or green and pink, I guess, because there's a lot of red and orange and dark colors in these cats, and yellow in these cats. So this, I think, will help it stand out for me a little bit more. Maybe I'll even make this one blue. You really want to make your life easier with small things like this. Okay, cool. So now I can really see what I'm doing. Great. Remember when I gave you the overview and we saw that it's growing to fit the edges of one mask or shrinking to be compressed inside the edges of another mask? We need that mask or that path. We need that in each layer. Like we need the Litten mask inside the Tora cat layer and the Tora mask inside the Litten layer, right? So that's no problem, really easy. Just copy it, literally select it, hit Command or Control C. Then we're gonna go up to Litten and click on masks, okay? So think of this like a folder, this word masks here. It's like a folder and all of our mask paths are inside of it. So when you select it and press Command or Control V, you're gonna paste your Tora mask inside the Litten layer. Now I wanna get my Litten mask, so select that, Command or Control C, and bring that down to the big cat, Tora cat, and select masks and paste it in. So now each layer has the big cat and the little cat path pasted into it. The next step is to add the effect that tells it to grow or shrink to fit inside these paths. Okay, and that is called Reshape. Okay, so let's go get the Reshape effect. Go to Effects, Distort, Reshape. So we'll click that. Now it should appear automatically over in the effects panel here. If it doesn't, go to your layer and twirl down the effects and just double click on Reshape and it will pop up here. All right, cool. So we've got some options here. We've got source masks, source mask. So that's what we want it to start as, right? And then we've got destination mask. That's what we want it to become. So we want it to start as Litten and become Tora. So let's set that now. Source mask, Litten. Destination mask, Tora. Okay. Now, nothing will happen, right? Let's preview this. Okay, so nothing's happening. Okay, why is nothing happening? We need to tell it how long this reshaping effect will take. Okay, and the way we do that is with the percent option. Now think of it as percent of the reshape that has happened. So if we go to 1 second on our timeline and we click the stopwatch, we're gonna lock it in at 0%, that's exactly what we want, right? We want 0 reshaping done at the beginning. We want it to be just the shape of the small cat. And then let's jump ahead to, 1 second. And let's change that percent to 100. Okay, so now we've got 100% reshape. We've gone 100% from Litten to Tora. Maybe I'll hide Tora cat. I'm gonna hide this bottom layer here just to make it a little clearer. Okay, so we're gonna hit play. And it's doing this weird backflip thing, okay, which is sort of bizarre. As it renders here, it's a little slow, I guess. It's doing this weird backflip thing, but the general idea of getting it to fill the shape of the blue path has been achieved, right? So this is roughly the same shape as the cat underneath, which is a good thing. We've just got to figure out why it's doing this backflip thing that it's doing, okay? And that's not so hard. there's something called correspondence points. All that means is certain points in the paths are trying to become other points on the other path. So we've got our green path and our blue path. And if we look at, like, for example, if we look at this point here, this whisker point, and this whisker point, the computer isn't good at guessing like how those points are related. Okay, so we can see how it has guessed. It has guessed that this foot, right, this foot here, if I follow this gray line, it has guessed that that foot should become the tip of the tail. All right. So that's why this is not working. That's why it's doing a backflip, right? The foot is trying to become the tail, and we really don't want that. So that's okay. We can change it very easily. If you move your mouse over the correspondence point, okay, well, first of all, if you don't see the correspondence points, if you don't see the gray line, make sure you've selected the reshape effect. Okay, that's step number 1. Hover over the point, and it's kind of hard to find sometimes, right? There you go. You'll see it right there. Just click and drag and put it somewhere that makes sense. So I want the tail to become the tail. So there we go. The tail has become the tail. Sometimes you're gonna be like, like I can't get my mouse over. I need to zoom in. So you zoom in, and then you're like, well, because I'm so zoomed in, I can't get the correspondence point to the tail because I can't see the tail. This is what I do when that happens. I'll just move it as far as I can. And then I'm going to hold down spacebar to get the hand. And then I'm going to crawl up. I'm just going to move. Repeat that until I get to where I need to be. Space, and then click and drag to crawl. And then there we go. So now the tail is going to become the tail. Good. I also want to add another correspondence point because sometimes you need more than one, especially if it's sort of a complicated image. So to add it, you just want to hold down Option on a Mac or Alt on Windows. Then just click somewhere. So I'm going to click on the whisker here. All right. And look, it's added a correspondence point. Now, unfortunately, it's done a pretty crappy job of guessing where that should go. It thinks the whiskers should become the hind legs. So no problem. I'm just going to grab this correspondence point and move it over to here. Cool. Now, I'm going to zoom out, recenter. Okay. Let's see how this looks. By the way, if your computer starts to get really slow, try setting your resolution to something a little bit lower. It's just the preview resolution. It won't impact your final output. Okay, so it's not doing a backflip anymore, but it is sort of getting, like, it's growing for some reason. I don't know why it's growing, but it really wants to grow. So that's cool. Let's see our next options here. We've got elasticity. So let's try setting that to loose. Okay, let's see what that does. Okay, it's a little bit better, but it's still doing that weird grow thing. All right, we got one more thing here. Let's go to interpolation method. All right, and let's change that to linear interpolation. All right, now we'll preview that. All right, there we go. So now we're getting what we need there. Okay, so the little cat is morphing to be the outline of the big cat, which is what we want. So now what we need to do is take the big cat and scrunch it up into the shape of the little cat, and then make it expand into the shape of itself. So let's just clear up some noise here. Let's hide Litten. So I'm going to hide the Litten layer. I'm going to select my Tora cat layer. I'm going to make it visible. We're going to say Effect, Distort, Reshape, just like we did before. All right, and remember, if you don't see it appear in the effects panel over here, just make sure you go down to Effects, and you can double click it right here, and that will pull it up. So this one is a little bit confusing, but hopefully I can make sense of it. We actually want to set the source mask to Litten. Excuse me. We want to set the source mask to Tora mask. And we want to set the destination to Litten. The sort of confusing part is we don't actually want to start as Tora. Tora's the big cat. And we want to scrunch this up and start this as the little cat. So what we're going to do to make that happen is at the 0 second mark, we want to set the percent to 100. See that? So if we have the destination at 0, then we haven't gone to the destination at all. If we set the destination to 100% complete, that means that at 0 seconds, we are 100% of the way to our destination. And what's our destination? The small cat. Okay. Now, that means that if we jump ahead to 1 second, which is where our little cat has morphed into our big cat, we want to bring the destination down to 0, right? So go back to the full-size cat. All right, so I'm going to turn on little cat there. We'll preview this. We'll play this out. It's probably going to be a little bit slow, and we'll see how that works. So we've got this same twisting and twirling problem here. It's going frame by frame as it renders out. Sometimes I don't mind when it's a bit choppy because it slows down the action so you can see what's happening. But look, we're definitely getting sort of the destination that we want. Things are starting to finish the way we want them. So let's hide Litten. Let's go back to our Tora cat. Okay, and you know what it might be? It might be those correspondence points again. So select the reshape effect, and yeah, look. So those auto correspondence points they're just no good. So drag this up. Oh, so sometimes you accidentally select the path, which is what I just did. You'll see a tiny little O appear. A tiny little O will appear beside your mouse there. Move that up. Okay, and just to be safe, I'm going to add another one. So I'll hold down Option on Mac or Alt on Windows. And that's going to add another one. And I'm going to grab that point and drag it to there. Cool. Now let's see what that looks like. Oh, you know what else we should do? Let's set the elasticity to loose. And let's set the interpolation to linear. Okay. All right, let's render this out. Nice. That's what we want. All right, let's turn on Litten, the little cat. Okay, now let's play it. Okay, yes. So the only thing that's left to do is to make the little cat slowly fade away as the big cat, to like reveal the big cat. That's pretty easy. We'll set our current time indicator to 0 seconds. And then we want to find under transform, we want to find opacity. We want to turn that on. And then I'm going to move ahead to, just before the animation ends. So let's say like this is about 1 3/4 seconds. Sorry, 3/4 of a second. And at that point in time, we'll set the opacity to 0. And that's going to make the little cat invisible. There you go. Now, I kind of feel like the little cat starts to vanish too quickly, right? So if I just grab this, not too quickly, too soon. So if I just grab this, I can give it a split second of morph while it's still the little cat. Yeah, maybe that actually wasn't so good. And that's kind of, how to do this. There's a lot of finessing involved at this point. So we can also, maybe we should make the little cat, like the big cat, crossfade underneath. So we can adjust the opacity of that too. We could start the opacity of the big cat at 0 and then make it finish at 100 to maybe get a slightly smoother change. Something like that. So now that big cat's invisible at first. Yeah, that's a little bit smoother. Yeah. All right, cool. So that's it. That's how you can morph PNGs or other bitmaps. As long as you have a couple paths, you can do this with the Reshape tool.